Hey, we are live.
Thank you. Welcome everybody back to Housing, House General and Housing. And it is still Friday, May 9th. And this afternoon, we're going to do two things. But before I start, Peter, can you hear us?
Doesn't.
Is this Greg or Peter?
So that's correct.
Yeah, and Greg, can you hear us?
This is Greg. Yes, I can.
Good, perfect. Okay. So we're this afternoon going to hear one of the things that we began to take testimony on is school building reuse. It's just part of the whole education issue. We've already heard testimony of Ben Doyle from the Vermont Preservation Trust. And so that will do that. And then we're going to hear, we're going to go over H461 as it came back from the Senate. It passed out of the Senate late, this morning, and take a straw poll on where we stand. So we have two witnesses here to talk about the school building reuse issue. Peter Fairweather, who's the president of Fairweather Consulting, and Greg Gossens, who's a partner of GB Architecture. So what I think I'll do, gentlemen, is we'll introduce ourselves to you. Peter, can you hear us? We'll introduce ourselves to you, and then you can tell us your names and what you do for the record. And Peter, perhaps you should go first. So take it away.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Ashley Bartley. I serve the towns of Fairfax and Georgia.
Hi, Leonora Dodge, Essex and City of Essex Junction.
Joe Parsons, Newberry, Topsom, and Barat.
Hi, Tom Charlton, Athens, Chester, Grafton, and Williams.
Debbie Dalton, St. Johnsbury, Concord, and Kirby.
Gail Peso, Chittenden 20, Colchester.
Mary Howard, Rutland City District 6.
Thank you. And I'm Martin Holly, and I represent Calais and Plainfield and Marshfield. And Peter, tell us who you are for the record and take it away.
Okay, Peter Fairweather, I'm proprietor of Fairweather Consulting. My work is pretty much involved in rural and small town revitalization and strategic planning in New York and New England, with the particular emphasis on Vermont. And a lot of my work is involved in the market analysis for the repurposing of civic facilities like schools and churches. Excuse me, the projects I've been involved in, just to give you a few of them, in Rochester, the Valley Hub Initiative, the Arlington Common, which was the creation of a civic facility from a former Catholic church, Pittsford Village Farm, and a variety of village revitalization projects in Cabot, East Hardwick, Coventry, West Burke, Swanton, and a few others, and often have worked with Greg on these projects. So, again, I've been asked about the whole process of the repurposing schools and what's that is like. And what I thought I'd do is I'd start with an example, which is how we all kind of expect these things to go. And this is actually from some work I did in New York about 15 years ago in the Tug Hill Plateau region, in a series of communities about an hour north of Syracuse on the I-80 corridor. So there were three schools. This was three districts that had consolidated. They had three elementary schools that needed to be reused. There was a fairly substantial population loss. So the first one, and so there were three public hearings to start the process. In the first one, the building was right off of I-81, about an hour north of Syracuse. We gave the presentation about what the project was going to be like, the work that we were going to do, some preliminary findings, and it was carried by the Syracuse newspaper. The next day, I get a call from a small manufacturer who says, gee, we're about an hour north of where this school building is, and we need to get closer to the Syracuse airport. Can we buy this building? And basically, the work was largely done in that transaction. Second building, public meeting, again, also carried in the Syracuse papers. And at one point, one of the audience members was from the State Department of Environmental Conservation. And just to remind everybody that the Salmon River fish hatchery was just downstream from the school property, and the school property abutted the Salmon River, which is one of the best fishing rivers in the Northeast. Next day, phone call, a hotel developer. They want to build a fishing lodge on this property. And both of those things happen. The third property was about probably 15 miles east of these, not adjacent to an interstate, not close to the Salmon River. We went through the whole process there, and I checked to see the status of this building. And it looks like in 2022, which is again about 12 years later, they were auctioning off the building. They had never found a use for it. And I think,
Do you know the result of the auction?
I do not know the result of the auction. I was trying to find that for the testimony, but I do not know. But I think what I want to point out is this whole process is a very emotional process. School buildings are important to people. They're important to communities. But one of the things that happens is by the time a building is abandoned in a rural area, the community itself has probably gone through some disruption, population loss, economic retrenchment. And the school building has been judged to no longer have a use as a school, and I don't want to speak to the merits of that, but that's the situation. And at the same time, there's been some either population or economic dislocation because of the nature of the rural areas, particularly in the Northeast. And here's the problem, is these processes typically treat the building that's being disposed of as an asset. And you can see the examples I just gave, clearly the one next to the Salmon River, it was an asset because of the Salmon River. The other, because it was on the interstate less than an hour from Syracuse, it was an asset. The third building was not. And in many cases, these buildings don't have an apparent use, and they've been judged no longer useful as schools. So what we're talking about is the transfer of a liability, not an asset. And what the communities are being asked to do is to take this liability and transform it into an asset, which is often successful and has a major impact on the community, but it's an extremely complex process that's usually handed off to volunteers. Here, take this liability, take this straw and spin it into gold is kind of what the assignment is. And what I think, well, first of all, it's amazing the heroic efforts that you see in each of these communities. The work that these volunteers are doing is astounding in terms of its quality and its dedication, and they're to be congratulated for that. But, my overall observation is that there should be some recognition in this process, either in the form of technical assistance or financial support, that the recipients of these properties are undertaking very difficult work that will have a profound impact on the future of their communities. Again, they're taking this straw and spinning it into gold. And if they get it right, it's a huge asset and source of revitalization for the communities. But the task that they're being asked to undertake is Herculean. So I offer.
You have a question here, go ahead.
I'm so sorry to interrupt.
No.
Just as we're talking about, the Herculean task that this is and the revitalization, when we had Ben Doyle, and he had really said the way to make reuse successful is to have a strong public campaign within your communities. I think the thing I'm concerned about is that no one wants to see their schools close. Even if it were to make the most sense in the world, I think we are all very loyal. We love our community schools. I mean, that's what Vermont is about. That's what New England's about, those small communities. Do you, one, agree that there really needs to be that community buy-in with reuse and revitalization? And how, as a legislature, like how could we help spur that on? What
Yeah.
could we do to help in that effort? You know,
Okay.
there's
Yeah, let me get the first, yes, there really does need to be the community buy-in. And I'll go back to that example of the manufacturing company that showed up in the place near Syracuse. The community, the one use they didn't want to have in the school, because it was right in the middle of the village, was manufacturing. So this guy shows up and he says, I want to put this manufacturing business in there. I said, okay, we need to have a public meeting to discuss this. And, you know, great turnout. The building was filled. The guy stands up and says, all right, right now, with your school, you have 25 large diesel vehicles that go in and out of your village twice a day. In my manufacturing operation, there's one delivery from FedEx in the morning and one shipment at night. And that's the impact on the community. And it just changed the whole nature of the debate because there was that public conversation. So I think that's absolutely essential, because the other thing is, as you pointed out, these are the heart and souls of these communities. And to just treat them as if it's just real estate misses the whole point.
yeah.
And in terms of what can be done, you know, like I mentioned, I think there needs to be resources devoted to assisting communities through this process. And
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
well, you know, it could be, for example, as simple as creating a central clearinghouse in some state agency, or maybe even creating an office that just monitors the reuse of civic facilities. So it understands what's happened in these different places, what's worked, what hasn't. So when these communities are faced with this problem, there's a go-to place that they can say, all right, we need to call this office and get the skinny about how to move forward.
You know, Greg, perhaps, would you identify yourself for the record so we can involve you in this conversation?
Sure. My name is Greg Gossens. I'm a partner with GBA Architects and Planners. We are primarily an architect and planning firm that works with small communities and community redevelopment projects throughout the state of Vermont. And a lot of them are adaptive reuse of existing community buildings, particularly schools.
Did I understand that you and Peter work together?
We have, and we're working together right now in Roxbury,
Yes.
trying to help them work through the process of their school closure.
Well, maybe I have some questions, but rather than ask them just to Peter, maybe Greg, if you something you'd like to say initially, and then we can ask questions of both of you and you can tag team. Does that make sense?
Sure,
Sounds like
absolutely. Well, since
So-
Peter and I, we work together so often, other than his story of the New York schools, his comments are pretty much the same as what I feel also, is the communities are, if they're going to have a school closure, which really breaks the heart and sometimes even can break the psyche of a community, they need to have some technical expertise and some financial resources to try to figure out what to do with that heart and soul that in many cases was just ripped out. And so there's that, because it costs money. I mean, and here's where we come in, is a lot of times a nice community reuse would be, for instance, like childcare. Every community needs childcare. But if a building is going to cost $300 a square foot to rehabilitate to accommodate a childcare center, there's no way that'll pencil out. It's a community need, but they can't pay the kind of rent that would be required to make that a financially viable reuse.
I have to tell you, I just
It's a
cannot,
relevant reuse, but not a viable reuse financially.
I have to tell you, I just cannot pass up the opportunity to tell you that today I had a class of third graders from my community here, and one of them had lost a piece of paper on which he'd written an idea and went to the sergeant at arms and got the paper and then wrote it again for me, and I will read you what it says. It says, "The amount of money parents have to pay for daycare should not be this much money. It should be about $15 to $20. There you go. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Well,
Be
that's
careful,
precious, and
Nick,
it's so true.
Yeah.
So,
So for instance,
So
in
go ahead.
I'll take anecdotal in Rochester, which Peter and I worked on. They closed the high school. It's about 33,000 square feet. To make it usable for housing did not work.
why didn't that
We
work?
found that out. Reached out to the Twin Pines Housing Trust, and Andrew Winter, the executive director, came and looked at it and said, yes, this building is not feasible for housing.
Physically.
Sorry, go ahead.
Physically not feasible?
Yes, it was physically not feasible. Location was great, but physically not feasible. It was a slab on grade building, one floor. The footprint would not lay out well, would not lay out at all for housing and the like. So then and these are all volunteers, as Peter mentioned, are searching for a use for this building, and to renovate it, just even to the most modicum levels, was a little over $100 a square foot. Now, $100 a square foot, there is no way you could build a new building of that quality for $100 a square foot. It's a deal. But the problem is it's a 33,000 square foot building in a community that doesn't need a 33,000 square foot building. They can't find anybody to backfill this thing, regardless of how much of a deal it is. Rochester, we're just starting. We may find out otherwise. I'm also doing one in Springfield, the Park Street School. That's 90,000 square feet, and it's taking about 8 years to still try to find enough backfilled uses to go in there. It's maybe 1/4 backfilled right now. And it's one of those things they're going to spend a lot of money with speculation. And it's like, do they build it and then they will come? Or do they build it and then nobody comes? Or do they even build it? And those are the things where these communities need some sort of technical resources to help them shake that through, because it's really crucial.
Let's tease that apart a little. I mean, I think we get that a number of us have been involved in community partnerships that have, rehabilitated stores or done other things. And the idea that you need a partnership between local activists who are willing to do the work and professionals who can help them see what they need to see. For example, you just gave an example of telling people the sad news they couldn't do it, they couldn't reuse the Rochester School for housing. They couldn't know that. They needed you or someone like you, I guess, Greg, to tell them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So let's talk about that. What are your thoughts about, so it's got to be a partnership between professionals like you and Peter and these people. And it's a partnership that changes over time. I mean, there's the initial work, and then there's the search for uses, and then so do you have any thoughts on sort of what that partnership involves and where one can get the money for it?
The money. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the tough things about this is it costs money. And up till now, it's almost like in a lot of places, like the volunteers are sort of absorbing that cost. They're taking on a lot of strain and pressure and deadlines to do this work, where if there was money available to do two things. I mean, first of all, maybe to hire consultants, but also it's helpful to have a broker in this process. Like you're a community, you need to find reuses of your school. Well, we're going to hire consultants. Who should we hire? And how do we go about that?
And how do we find the money to hire them?
Yeah, that's good. We have a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah,
So,
so volunteers really don't know where to shake the money tree, so to speak.
yeah, and I think that many municipalities also will have that issue. So I think, having consultants is really important. What are your thoughts in bringing VLTC into these conversations? I haven't thought about it, but that might be somebody we want to talk to in this conversation of reuse. Are they, do you see them potentially as a partner?
Cities. The
Vermont
VLCT is the
League of
Vermont
Towns.
League of Cities and
Sorry.
Towns, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, they would be a great partner
Okay.
on that respect. Down in Springfield, it was the local community development, Springfield Regional Community Development Corporation. Well, there's some expertise there, but very small communities don't have that kind of a resource available to them.
Mhm.
So League of Cities and Towns would be a very viable place.
Yeah, because my first thought was, use the regional development corporations, but, they're not heavily staffed and those folks are already committed to other projects. So bringing that idea of like a third statewide partner to serve that function in the League of Cities and Towns, I think is the.
Yeah, because there's two legs to this stool. Maybe there's a third leg too, and that's what goes in it. But the two the financial legs is having the resources available to do the study, and then have some sort of resources available to do the renovations or whatever needs to be done to facility to make it a marketable or usable building for them.
Do
And a
you
lot
have
of these
any,
buildings, actually, the buildings are the buildings, the sites, the properties that come with it are can really be assets.
well, go ahead.
I was just wondering whether you have a general sense of how much a feasibility study runs.
You mean a market study or the full feasibility study?
Well,
With
what do you
looking to
consider let's drill down. What's a feasibility study? And Greg mentioned a study. What are we talking about in terms of what it is, and then your thoughts about cost?
Yeah, all right, so one component would be, what are the market opportunities out there? That's the market study that I do. And then Greg looks at the building and what can be done and what can't be done with the building. And then the others.
I mean,
ahead.
Peter, we've been doing this for around $25,000.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'll have to admit, a lot of that is a labor of love.
yeah.
I don't want to come off as a martyr, but
Yeah.
but on the other hand, you get invested in these communities, you just want them to succeed so doggone much that, sometimes it doesn't really work out financially, but nevertheless, that's about what our going rates have been for these small communities.
And the other thing, that's important is the other role is kind of almost like a project management role, which could be, in terms of you got the study, how do you keep it going? And then how do you find the money and put together the package to make this happen?
Do you find that where do you find the initial funds for your study come from?
Municipal planning grants, I think, is
Yeah.
one source.
They seem to be the predominant ones. Municipal
Yeah, and
planning
then
grants.
sometimes there'll
Are
be
those-
some private.
Is that through the state, through like ACCD?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gail?
What does the study include?
Well, it'll be the market analysis, the physical inventory of the building, and also community outreach. Some sessions to ask people, what do you want? Here's what we're looking at. Does this make sense? Here's the final project and the steps going forward. Is everybody okay with this?
What are you asked to provide a budget for maintaining the building while they think about it?
No. You mean just sort of the holding costs of the
The
building?
holding costs.
Because typically it's, what are the costs of renovating the building, and then what are the operating costs, let's say 5 years out? That's a really interesting concept, because often one of the things that can make this complicated is the feeling that there's a decision that has to be made right away, and the consequences of delaying the decision are catastrophic. And and I think if there was also, generally the schools can provide some information about here's what it takes to operate the building, but many times their systems are centralized, and it's difficult for them to just parse out just this one building.
Right,
But
but
I
we
think-
do our best to try to figure it out. And Peter's thing about urgency sometimes comes up. I'll use the Springfield Park Street School one is the heating system. Well, there was no ventilation system, it was non-existent, but the heating system was on its last legs, and they were putting a pretty healthy 6 figures into fuel to keep this building heated even to a 50-degree temperature over the winters. And but every winter was a gamble. Is this heating system going to basically die on us during this coming heating system? So there was an urgency to try to figure out what to do with it. And there alone, it really made Springfield Regional Development Corporation go out there and try to find some grants just to temporarily cob this thing together to limp through another year and year to year to year. So, I mean, you do get these senses of urgency sometimes on these projects, because some of these buildings need a lot of work.
Peter, do you do the market analysis?
Yes.
What's involved in trying to I mean, these buildings are like one of a kind. How do you think, well, like what's involved in a market analysis of something for which there's almost no market?
Well, that's a nice way of putting it, because that's the challenge. I mean, because the market analysis are, what are the local demographics? What are the local consumption patterns? What are the other kind of anchor institutions that are in the area? And from that, are there sources of demand, which could be childcare, which could be a restaurant, those kinds of things. But that's the real issue. Is often in these situations, the reason to go back to the reason the heating system is in bad shape is the school has basically been closed or been closing for 10 years. So that when it's closed, the situation is such that there's the facility needs, and then the market, it may not be the most dynamic market in the world. There are other situations where you can, again, the Syracuse area, one of the schools was able to tie into outdoor recreation activities. But the marketing part, it tears your heart out to do this work, because it's difficult to find the opportunities. The people are involved are emotionally attached to the school and are fully committed to finding an opportunity, or fully committed to realizing a particular vision. So that the dynamics involved in this process are really trying for the communities. And another thought, this is a little strange, but I think it's related. If when this doesn't work, we have no use for this, we can't find a use for this facility. There's a community mourning process that takes place. And it really needs to, this is going to sound a little soft-headed, but follow me. But it needs to be recognized, and assistance needs to be given to help people say, all right, this one initiative didn't work, but there are other assets in this community that can be used to build a future. Maybe the school building isn't the only thing. There are other things you can do. And because again, these processes are fraught with emotion. I don't have to tell you folks about what this is like. And that's part of what makes it, that combined with the nature of the market in most places, is what makes it so difficult.
Is a lot of that 25,000 or approximately spent in meetings?
I wouldn't say a lot. Well, the way Greg and I work is you do the meetings. If you need to do the meetings, you do the meetings.
Right. No, most of it is homework. I mean, the actual work of putting the screws to the data and facts so that when you go to the meetings, you can offer up accurate, clear-headed information to the community so they can make good decisions.
In your experience, you guys, where are you located?
I'm in Burlington.
And I'm in the lovely burg of New Paltz, New York, in the Flatlands.
Right. But you work in multiple states, and your experience is, in any situation, is there a state office or a state source of funds that is looking at these issues?
Not
Is there
not that I'm
state
aware of.
participation?
Oh, you mean looking at the adaptive reuse issues
For schools?
for
Yes.
schools? Yeah. I'm not aware of any. You know, I think the model that we've been talking about is sort of the model that's used. Is here's this thing, we're going to call it an asset, we're going to give it to the volunteers to figure out. In some cases, like one of the things that was helpful in that Syracuse project, it was in the Tug Hill region in New York, and there's a Tug Hill Commission, which is kind of like a mega regional development commission that was able to provide some staffing support and was able to help the community find funding to both do the work and move forward with implementation.
Yeah, in Rochester was Two Rivers out of Coeechee.
Adequacy, yeah.
They had Springfield with Springfield Regional Development Corporation. They were the ones who took the building for $1. The Two Rivers, they're just advisory.
They took it over.
Springfield Regional Development Corporation took the building over for $1. They
And
would
that
love
means
they would
they
love to
took-
sell it. They would love to fill it up, make it viable, and get rid of it. They're not in the business of owning and operating a large facility. So
Except they are.
Well.
yeah, they are.
long-term,
Yeah,
right?
not happily, but they are.
I thought they have a plan for that school though.
They have a plan for portions
Rochester,
of the
for
school, a
Springfield.
small
Oh, yeah,
chunk.
it's-
And
machines
sadly,
there.
those portions don't really pay much rent, so it's not a financial, right now, it's not filled and it's not totally viable.
It was the reason that I asked about the adaptive reuse when we were talking about the chip stuff. Because that school has, I think, a basketball court in it. So the square footage
Yeah,
question,
right, yeah.
because they do have a plan for it, I think.
Yeah, but it's apparently not working, right? The
Well,
plan.
We're working on one up in Newport, an old, well, it was a parochial high school, so it wasn't part of the Vermont closing or consolidation, but we're putting 24 for sale condominiums into it, and it had a gym, and they are going to be 2-bedroom loft type apartments or condominiums, going to be gorgeous. And but there it was, you know, the local housing authority got the option to purchase the old parochial school. So that's, you know, rural edge got it. And that one's working. I mean, that one's going to work out well. Their financials are working out. They're getting VHFA and various type funding sources for it, and it's working out.
So Bob Flint submitted some written testimony recently to another committee
Mhm.
indicating that a lot of these buildings are usable for mixed use, right? Where you might have housing in one end of it and retail in another or something else. Does that complicate the funding stack, the financing? When you're looking for grants or you have to meet certain thresholds of so many square feet of this, that, and the other thing, have you taken on projects where the building is used for a number of different things?
Yeah, well,
And the-
Springfield is one of them that we're working on right now. Yeah, I think it helps
Okay.
because there are different funding channels that you can tap into. And you can go in for things like new market tax credits and historic preservation tax credits, low income housing tax credit. I mean, you can start folding in these various funding sources rather than having to put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. And we are looking for studios type apartments with Bob Flint in the Springfield Park Street School building.
do you guys, I mean, one of the functions, one of the important functions, I was involved in a project that involved the rehabilitation of an 1850s store building with three residential units above. And in fact, Preservation Trust helped us. One of the first sources of money we had, it's a very small amount actually, it was about 10,000 maybe. And in what turned out to be a $2.8 million project with about 30 sources of funding, was allowed us to hire a development consultant. So that we were, by development, I mean as in fundraising, so that we were able to get some initial grants. And then those grants paid for people like you guys.
Mhm.
Do you find that in your projects that are successful, there was some sort of fundraising, I should say grant raising expertise, or do you guys provide that, or do you work with people like that?
We work with people like that. But some communities need that resource and some communities don't need that resource. But it's about, you know, who knows where to access grants and write grants? That's really, really valuable. Rochester, it was some really dedicated people that are volunteers. And it was it's tough. That's not what they do for a living. And they all have day jobs, but they were good. I mean, but to rely on that kind of dedication, it's tough.
The reason I asked about state is because it's clear to everybody involved here in this building in the educational reform effort that a component of it is going to have to be raising large sources of funds for school building renovation and renovation efforts. Our school buildings, as you probably know, are generally in pretty terrible shape. And so the question, of course, that's going to, I think, will be asked of us is, should we include in that the bond issues or whatever happened to raise that money, should we include some seed funding for reuse studies for those schools that are going to close? And if that's the case, that money would probably come, I mean, it could be funneled through the RDCs or the RPCs. It could come from a central state office. That's the kind of decision that we would have to make here in order to, to decide, to make recommendations. Do you have any thoughts at all on that?
Well, if the education process leads to closing a school, there ought to be some funds to help that community try to figure out the path forward with that lost school. Whether it goes through the ed fund, I mean, I'm not political, so I can't help you negotiate that or offer anything other than it ought to come from the state somewhere along the line. There ought to be some sort of fund source to help these communities with a school closure.
Yeah,
And that ought to be, if it's going to happen because of a statewide decision or whatever, it ought to be funded because of that statewide decision.
Great, thank you.
There's a way in which it's a test of how serious do you take the quality of your communities. Because that needs to be funded in order to keep the communities whole. Just to get a little bit into the weeds, it might be useful to have that source, at least for the first 5 years, in a centralized state disbursement, because then you can start to track what are the kinds of requests that you're getting for assistance.
Right.
So that
And what works, right,
you can then develop the program more targeted.
right.
Yeah. Boy, I think that's a great idea because you want some sort of accountability feedback loop.
Right, what works, what's best practices, et cetera.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Because we should fairly soon move on. Gentlemen, I have a feeling you haven't seen the last of us.
Well, thank you for having us.
Well,
Yeah, I
thank you for
appreciate it.
taking
Hopefully,
time.
hopefully we were some help to you.
Yeah, and thank you for your good work on a really difficult issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, take care.
Bye now.
Thank you. Ashley,
Oh, yeah, she just stepped out for a second. She's in the cafeteria
oh, okay.
in a meeting.
The next item that we're going to take up is H 461, which is an act relating to expanding unpaid leave, and that is the act which my illustrious senior member was the co-author or author of, and went to the Senate, passed out of here, passed out of the House, went to the Senate, and as of this morning, passed out of the Senate third reading. And although we do not have possession of it, as I indicated, we know what it is, and therefore we're able to review it and know that it is what it is. You don't have to worry that it's going to be further amended in the Senate. So what I would like to do is have Sophie come up. Sophie, are you prepared to share your screen and present Bill, remind us of the bill since it's been a while, and show us changes. And then I'm hoping we can get.
Yeah. And it passed unanimous voice vote.
I will, yes. You have my email?
I'm going home now.
We're all
Oh,
stealing your
I
lovely
didn't
lunch.
eat. My family was visiting. So I was with them for a minute.
I know. We're all impressed. We clearly didn't eat enough for lunch today.
Sophie, why don't we're waiting for a vice chair, but I think she knows what's in it. Why don't you take us through? What?
Excuse me, Interrupt. The way this was shared with me is not the usual link. Is it something I could pull the bill on the website and share my screen? Is that possible?
I think you could do that.
Sure.
Okay, thanks for
And
that.
that would mean that we'll have to have, you'll be the one who scrolls, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all
Um,
right.
Thank you.
It's not a huge bill, so shouldn't be too hard.
You don't want me to.
Let's see, I'm wondering if it's on, is it, we can all call it up. Let's see. Is it posted on our website? Or? No, it's as it passed out of the Senate. and
Yeah, because they did a strike ball.
Yeah.
It would be under the calendar, from yesterday. Yesterday's Senate calendar.
Right.
Under the
the
Senate
Senate's-
calendar,
Yeah, calendar.
For May 8th.
right, and if you could,
It's a wonderful day in history, May 8th.
The unofficial.
Yeah. are you able to post that in our website, or should we just all go to wherever you find it?
On page 1324 of May 8th, Senate calendar.
Let's see, go up May 8th, Senate calendar.
Yeah. You go to one number 30.
Committee, Senate committee, Senate,
1324. 5.1, right? Senate. They go to Senate, all Senate calendars. And then they, yes.
And then let's see.
Then you go to over 15, 20.
All right, so what I'm gonna do, everybody, is I am going to now download this to desktop. Save, then I'm going to send it because I have what do this.
I guess I could have done that.
I'm just gonna email it to all of you.
Well, we can all get it. What is it, the bill?
The amendments.
I'm
The
just
amendment.
making, I'm just making it easy for everybody else.
Okay.
Amendment, yes. Heavy words.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill, Senate bill.
Sort thereof of. Bye, Joe. Have a good weekend.
Um. He says, but what happened? Download.
That's his passed by house, but is this?
Oh, there it is. Okay, but I still wanna,
Oh, are we looking at March screen on?
Here it is.
That's not the right version. No, that's the passed by house. Where did you get?
just, here it is. I'm sending.
Stop sharing.
What's the number? The
Four
Senate number,
sixty-one,
461.
page 461. It was yesterday on the calendar. Is it this one? I haven't got.
Yeah, but they had a,
A new one?
I'll do
Yeah,
it.
just look at the, just
Just-
Senate.
Just,
Calendar, just go to tab on the top of the tabs. Instead of going to like committees or blah, 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 you just hit the Senate tab. And under Senate, it'll
did you get
have,
an email from me?
Yep.
Yeah, so
That's
then
it.
you
It's
just,
attached to the email from me, except I didn't get it from me. Oh,
It's
I
on
did.
page 1320.
Yeah, that's it. What's attached there is it.
yep, and then you
The
click
Senate.
on 1324.
Oh. And there it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
well, bearing in mind, I can't see it
yes,
because it's behind me.
but you can see it on your screen.
Yes, but I won't know what you're looking at.
Yeah, but we'll find our way.
We're looking at the Senate calendar.
Yeah,
So I know what- I mean, I won't know what you're looking at in
It's
terms of.
pretty screen.
Yeah, the
Okay,
exact thing.
you can just tell us the
Thank
section.
goodness. So
I think we
it
can.
would be a
manage.
lot of me
No,
looking at
Don't worry,
peppermint
Monica.
patties
Don't
behind
worry.
Mary's head.
All right.
It's all
So,
good.
Sophie Sadowny for the Office of Legislative Counsel. And we're looking at, H 461 as passed by the Senate this morning. I believe yesterday I sent around, you all received a summary of the changes. So I can just run through that again. So section 1, there was no change. Section 2 is definitions. Subsection 3 is the definition of domestic violence.
Right,
And that adds the definition of abuse that's in 15 VSA 1101.
that's the civil, oh, that's the broader definition, right?
It's a domestic violence one, but it talks about abusive and coercive behaviors. So again, the Vermont network had requested changing some of the reference to statutory definitions to be more inclusive, to capture more of the sort of controlling and abusive behaviors that individuals experiencing domestic violence suffer from. Subsection 5, the definition of employee, adds the reference to the Code of Federal Regulations.
Right, for
It
the,
includes the airline flight crew.
yeah,
That was not underlined. If you're looking at the Senate one from yesterday, the added language is not underlined, which is why there was an amendment today, just to make sure the underlined, because that language was added, makes it into the bill when it comes back over here. Subsection 9, the definition of in loco parentis, deleted the second sentence that was
Right.
in the definition, and the second sentence read, financial support is not a requirement for this relationship, recognizing caregiving roles beyond traditional definitions. Moving on to definition subsection 12 on safe leave. The definition it provided coverage under safe leave to attend a hearing for an order against stalking and sexual assault. That was removed from the definition of safe leave, and it's now returned back to where it currently is, which is in a separate statutory section that covers different reasons crime victims can go to court to request orders. And the benefit of that is, one, it keeps all those sort of court actions together, and two, it means that if somebody does need to go to court to get an order, it wouldn't count against their 12 weeks of unpaid leave. It's a separate bucket. The other definition under safe leave is there was a subsection added, quote, to respond to a fatality or near fatality related to domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking, either for themselves or for a family member. So that was just some additional language that was requested. And then just the phrase either for themselves or for a family member was added to the subdivision on meeting with a state's attorney or law enforcement officer. If you look at that section, that language is in there, but we didn't have it in that one little subdivision. So it was just making sure it was consistent. And then moving forward to the subdivisions 14 and 15 on sexual assault and stalking. Again, there was a request to replace the current definitions of sexual assault and stalking with reference to Title 12 instead of Title 15.
Yeah.
Moving on to Section 3, talking about leave. Subsection A2, bereavement leave. It retains that you can use up to 2 weeks of the 12 weeks for bereavement leave, but now it adds that no more than 5 work days of the available 2 weeks can be taken consecutively.
Right. All of these, you just went over this with us a few days ago. Maybe what you should do, we're gonna.
You got one more.
Okay, go ahead.
And then under 1 of Section 3, it adds that an employer may request documentation identifying a qualifying family relationship.
Right.
And then Section 4, there's no change. Section 5, it deletes the crime victim leave because there's now no change to that. And then Section 6 now becomes Section 5, and the effective date is unchanged.
So that is the bill.
Yes, sir.
I would like brief discussion because we have another meeting we have to get to from the author. How do you feel about this?
Is it 2 days, yesterday? Everything's a blur. Yeah, I feel good about it. The safe leave section is stronger, and the reason that it wasn't in ours as strong is because just timing wise, they didn't get to us in time before it left. Because it was very quick crossover meeting time, but I'm grateful that they caught those things and made it consistent. There was very little change in my opinion. We discussed yesterday or the day before, now I can't remember. So
It was the 7th, I just
2 days ago. Just the 5 days and totally good. The intent of the bill is still all there to make it equitable for different family structures, safely bereavement for folks who are experiencing loss, and nothing else really was changed. And I've watched the whole process and grateful for the Senate's work and getting unanimous votes on second and third reading. And I hope that our committee would vote to concur with the Senate so we can get that signed into law. And I think effective date is July, so very quickly. That's exciting to me.
I'll tell you what I'll do here. I'm going to put on the floor a motion myself to concur in the Senate. The S-125 is passed out of the Senate on the 9th of
H-461.
H4, excuse me, what am I? Somebody else.
So moved.
61. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any final discussion? we're gonna do this by straw poll. So all of those who vote for the motion to concur in the Senate version that we've just heard, please raise your hand. Okay, so that would be
10 to 0.
10
0,
10 to,
1.
well,
Well,
10,
Oh, yeah, 10-0.
10 0.
10-0.
Okay, recorder.
Do I have to
Great.
do anything with it?
Just remember it because you're going to, when it comes to us next week, when it
Great.
gets on the floor, you will have to report it.
Right, the concurrent.
Right. So listen, everyone, we're about to adjourn, but before we do, next week, Tuesday, 9 o'clock sharp, we are having a run through, we're having our first flyby, which is really going to just be a chance to kind of quickly look at a bill. And it's 217, which is the bill that was on the floor today. Yes.
117.
117.
From the Senate.
Yeah, right. And so at 9 o'clock, Tuesday, have a great weekend, everyone.
We're gonna talk at 9 on Tuesday
Right, yes, 9 o'clock,
because
flyby.
of because of the
It's
amendment.
later.
No,
Oh, the
just,
stuff that got pulled out of 117, the first 4 sections
Right,
that went to
yeah,
commerce,
right.
we're gonna look at those.
Yeah.
Okay.
okay,
And so that is why it was taken out with.
So it was in S 125.
Right.
It was workers' comp, so that stuff got taken out, put into it S 117.
Right.
However, there's a good portion of 117 that should be in our jurisdiction, that's not workers' comp.
Okay.
And that's what we heard on the floor today.
Yeah.
So we will now hear a walkthrough drive-by and because we have labor law as our jurisdiction.
And in the Senate, their committee has this stuff
Yeah.
and that stuff combined, so their bill had both.
so,
Thank you
And in addition-
for, I really would like to just say thank you for making sure that happens, because I think it's important to make sure that we are consistent in our attending to labor law.
and I have seen enough now sort of blurred edges on what commerce does and what we do that we will provoke a meeting with the speaker and Chair Marcotte and ourselves in an attempt to try to get a better definition of what they do and what we do. So that we don't have this going on. Yes, Sophie.
I sent to Magali, but I will send to everybody here, the sections on the rulemaking under VOSHA that were pulled out by House Commerce, so it's in the Senate version, but I will go ahead and send those to you, so everyone can look at them ahead of Tuesday if you want to, but I also sent them to Magali and asked her to print them out. So
Will it be available by Tuesday morning?
yes.
Great. Please come.
Yeah.